MX missile was advertised as a first strike missile.
Yeah, so the public, part of the public did not stand for that and were rioting and everything else. So they changed the name of it to Peacekeeper missile. And it was a huge missile, a lot taller than the missile that we had. The oh gosh, the uh, the the missile that was in. I have a recall problem.
Go ahead, just.
But I know what I know
okay,
what I'm trying to say.
keep going.
The MX missile was a first strike missile, and the people didn't like it, and so they changed the name to Peacekeeper, and went ahead and built the thing, and it was supposed to be strictly for defense, okay? But it really wasn't. It was a first strike missile, and what they did, they started building it, and they got it all to and it all kind of come together at one time. I think God planned it. He's in control. Jesus is in control of the leaders. He says so in his scripture, in his holy word, that he elected Obama. He put him in office, and he put Trump in office, and he had his reasons for doing that. Okay, he put every president in office. So the point of it is, I think this whole thing came together. There was a lot of people involved in building the missile, because in fact there were instruments that had been worked on for almost 30 years by old Doc Draper in Draper Labs, and he was 3 orders of magnitude more accurate than any gyro known at that time, and they all laughed at old Doc Draper and scoffed at him because they thought he was a little bit loco, you know. And that was his main thrust, and it was a very complicated gyro, and very few people understood it. So I did work in the gyro lab for 2 years, and sorted the error model out for it, and found 2 different things about it that nobody knew about that were error models, so that we could model them in the software. Okay, that was one thing. But later, then, as the missile progressed, they came to a guidance system, and the rule was that there were only a few satellites in the air at the time, and they figured that the enemy could knock them out easily. And then if you depended on satellite guidance, which was good to 3 meters, it was only military at that time, which would be about it's good to 1 meter. 1 meter, the latest satellite, but we're not allowed to use that because they could knock it out so easily, and there were only a few of them to knock out. By the way, my filter technique that I come up with is used everywhere now, and because there's lots of satellites all over the world, and but
what filter technique was this?
One at that time. So what I did, I came up with a new. Oh, let me tell you this. It's important. John Pinson was the president of Rockwell was John McCluskey, and John Pinson was the president's scientist. He was an MTS 7, just like I was, MTS 7. But he came up finally. He came up with the idea that using conventional control system technology, it wouldn't work because it would be inherently unstable. but I didn't tell him that, and I didn't let it be known that I was working on a scheme that was stable and new, and I felt pretty sure it would work. Uh, my my supervisor when I went there was the vice president at the time at this time, and he had done some preliminary work along that line, and it was good, but he hadn't quite solved it. So I talked to him about it, and uh, I think God had a hand in it because I know He did, and I've given Him all the glory for it. And because I could see in my sleep a big blackboard, and it was all illuminated, and I was hand was writing all the equations down, and they didn't go away. I mean, I could see them, and I could understand the equations and how it was going, and I was writing them on the board. When I finished, and they were given to me divinely. I had worked a lot in this area on my own. In fact, when I left, I got a OSU is where I got undergraduate work, and my graduate work, I did 2 years National Science Foundation Fellowship. I did there. They paid for everything, and but school, and I left there, and I went to work for North American, and I went ahead and got my degree from in science and engineering.
What level of degree was that?
Well, it would have been a doctorate, of science and engineering, but I didn't ever get the degree because I couldn't at that time. They didn't have any extensions, and although the professors came to North American and used Audinetics division's schoolrooms and everything to taught classes for credit, and after 5 o'clock I'd take 2 or 3 or 2 hour, usually a 3 hour course, which was I'd put in 3 hours 3 times a week, and if I didn't do that, I'd take maybe a 2 hour course, a lab course.
So you had the equivalent of a doctorate.
I had the equivalent, but I didn't have the
right.
I didn't have the on the residency and the I did a thesis for my master's in.
Mm-hmm. And you did get a master's.
Oh yeah. But I did the work, qualifying work, but I didn't. I
right.
couldn't leave the residency.
I hear that.
And write a dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
And have so that the profs could.
Mm-hmm.
See, I figured my profs had already. Well, I had.
Yeah, but this guidance system.
Guidance system.
You put the critical piece together.
My title was staff scientist.
That was my title. It worked. This guidance system that you
yes, it did.
Worked on worked.
Yes, it did. And they didn't buy. I know that the upper crust did not mind if they wanted the Russians trawlers to visit. We shot them from Vandenberg down to Kwajalein.
You tried them out.
Kwajalein Bay, and the Russians were out there with their trawlers, fishing trawlers, but the radar antennas and everything.
They saw that it worked. The Russians saw that your guidance.
They saw that the first missile that me and 2 guys from MIT launched it. Actually launched the missile because we were watching all of the controls, and all the meters and things. We didn't. That nobody else understood really. So it missed 78 feet, 6,000 miles, and it didn't have to have that much accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
but it had 78 feet,
and meanwhile, this was shot from while it was moving
6,
on a railroad
miles.
track.
No, it's shot from a silo.
Okay.
In fact, Rockwell had a contract for 50 of those to go in modified silos, and I essentially I was the only one that knew how to understood the guidance system. So it's called a statistical filter. The years ago, a fellow by the name of Gauss came up with a theorem, Gaussian theorem, that gave he proved that the most optimum system could be, or a set of numbers or anything, and you wanted a sample, that by using this formula, you could, where the system was one thing over here, it was a linear relationship, but in matrix form for us. And if you use that formula, you would get the optimum, which in this case minimized the error in it. So what I did, I learned how to put the functions, instead of using the Laplace transform to transform them from the classical form of solution was to do to solve problems in the frequency domain and then convert them to the time domain, which was a big problem, a lot of Mickey Mouse, a lot of stuff. So I learned to come up with a series solution that converged rapidly for the time domain solution directly. And we used punch cards, and my deck of cards was that big, and Tom's, who was a guy from back east, a good friend of ours, he had one that was punch cards, a box of that was that long, and that was thousands of cards, and he had to carry them over his shoulder. And he ran his program, and we ran that identical program, and mine ran in just a jiffy, and only had a few cards. And his run for I think it was like 3 hours, and we both got the same answer to 10 decimal places. So, it was Tom's universal problem solver, and the guy is a genius because he to solve first in the time frequency domain and then convert them for any case is a big deal. But I kind of let the air out of his tires. So,
good job.
Anyway,
we're going to have to go, Uncle Vince.
Anyway,
one last sentence.
I put this thing together, and it worked. First, it was in the laboratory being tested, and the whole system, and ground tested, and alignment, calibration and alignment all together automatically in one fell swoop. And I learned that how to interpret and how to read the traces that were printed on the recorders, and it looked like it was going to work for sure, but I didn't know yet. We wasn't finished testing it. So then that's when I was over I used to follow the chief scientist, who was an MTS-8. He's the chief scientist of the whole, from Rockwell, and he's a great guy. But anyway, I followed him. He and I became good friends, and I followed behind him. He go to the BMO, was a ballistic missile organization for the Air Force, the commanding general there, everybody knew him. They rolled the red carpet out, and I just slumped along behind him, you know. And so after a while, they got to knowing me, and I kind of, they kind of cut the, anyway, they cut to the chase, and when I was over there one time, and several of the colonels and so on came up to me and said, "Hey, the general, we know that you're working on a different solution to the problem." They were about to can the program, the whole program, because the president was convinced it didn't work. And it was, you know, anyway, they came to me and they said, "We've heard that you're working on this, and due to your past performance, we put a lot of stock in what you're doing. And so the general wants you to brief him, and for 5 minutes. You have to tell him what he needs to know in 5 minutes, and the program depends on it." And so I said, "Okay," and I went up to the general's office and gave him a 5-minute briefing, and he gave me, he said that this is the end of the year, so we don't have much discretional funds left, but if we don't use them, we lose them. So I'm gonna, we have $30,000. We'll give you for 30 days to write the report up and present the data, and why you believe it'll work. And so he did, but when I got back over to Rockwell, of course they were just all in a rage, because how dare you go and make a commitment with the Air Force? I mean, and so the general, the president called the general, and or the general called the president and said, "Look," he said, "if you want to stay in business, well, Air Force business, you're going to give Vince a lab and a computer, a dedicated lab and computer, and the next month nobody's to interrupt him at all. He's to do whatever he wants to do." And the guy, of course, he agreed, because what else could he do? But they didn't like it, because I briefed the general. I mean, I didn't do it but what if I'd said, "No, I'm not going to do it"? I would have been out of it. Everybody would have been out of the loop. And I just did it. And so we finished the report, and by that time the Air Force was hot for doing it, and that rail garrison came later.
Oh.
Rail garrison this was Silo. The first time the missile was ever fired.
Mm-hmm.
And we launched it, and it got 78 feet the first time, and the Air Force was just, you know, it was entirely self-contained. It only used the earth, the gravity field of the Earth, the direction of the gravity field, and the spin axis of the Earth. Those were the two references that it started with.
Awesome.
And nothing else. And then as I went on, I did a lot of nuclear work, and I had a classification that was higher than secret, top secret actually. It's about on the level of top secret. It was a SIMWITI
Uncle Vince, we're going to have to stop and let me go to the airport.